How to homestead, 4 decision phases. Your success is based more on your determination and decisions than in your current skill set. All right, Chair. Previously, we've discussed overview of what is homesteading and then an overview of the how to homesteading part. And last time we got into the goals and motivation. And today we're down into item 2 on our outline. So we did assessing yourself and your situation, goals and motivation. And today it's likes and dislikes, more about our natures. And so we'll be discussing that today. As before, you'll find this part of the outline up in the description. So go up to the description. You can't visualize the end point of your homestead journey until you know thyself. You need to understand your likes and dislikes. What's your nature and how does that fit into the homestead decision? And sometimes when you find it hard to determine what it is you like, try to think about the opposite, what you dislike. And often it's easier for us to figure out what we dislike, and we can take the opposite of that, and then we'll have what we like. First item, 2A, geography. Many times people have certain inclinations for what type of an area that they're comfortable living in. For example, some people may love living in a desert. I personally would find it, I couldn't stand it. Well, I like being in the trees and forests and hills, and I don't like particularly the flat. So it's something we need to take into account. Some people are fortunate they could live in any of those areas. Not a problem. So this is something you need to discuss. What kind of an area in terms of it's where is it located, in terms of its climate, what kind of features are around it? Is it flat? Is it hilly? Is it do you have water features around, rivers, lakes, ocean? Discuss that. Figure out what it is. Do you have particular inclinations? Could you live anywhere? Then that'd be great. You don't have to worry about it. Yeah, it's frankly better if you don't have any strong preferences. It will make it easier and less expensive to find a good homestead. So your questions: what types of geography would you like to live in? Be willing to live in? What types would you not be willing to live in? Item 2B, remoteness or proximity, the counterpart to that. There's a lot of trade-offs in this. And many times a couple may find that, one really likes to be remote and the other would like to be close to town. I guess more often it's the husband wants to be way out rurally and the wife wants to be closer to the shopping and such. That's kind of traditionally, but not always the case. But there are big factors. Being remote, the pros of that, obviously it's quieter, you're going to have less regulation. There's game if you're a hunter. You could be close to forests. It's easier for a bug out location. It's going to be easier for the end times. I'd like to be very rural, but it does have its drawbacks, and it's also difficult. You find you have isolation from your friends. It's difficult to do shopping. And what about your church family? What about being able to witness to others? And so there's some downsides to it as well. The biggest factor for most people, of course, is going to be commuting to or from work. To and from work. Now, it should be remembered that you could be, fairly rural, and then, the city's going to come catch up with you, as often happens, and people end up going further out into the country. And realistically, for many people, you may have to approach this as a 2-phase process. Due to your job situation, you may have to take a first step out, get a little distance from the city, and then maybe plan on taking another step later on. So on this proximity, ruralness, ask yourself this question, or let's say finish this sentence. We want to be remote enough to blank and not to blank. We want to be remote enough to blank and not to blank. So let's just help put it into context. Next item, food. the choice of food determines to some extent how you'll set up your homestead. Are you a hunter? Are you omni? Are you a vegetarian, organic? What are the items here, the check boxes? Figure this out. The food choices can really dictate a lot about what your homestead needs will be. For example, if you are a hunter and you plan on providing a lot of your meat in a in-time situation from hunting, I don't know how sustainable it is once everyone else is out hunting. I don't know how much game there would be, but if that's your plan, you'll want to be near some area where you have a large national forest or a large area where you have a hunting ground. You want to have a happy hunting ground. So think about a place with a happy hunting ground. If you're omnivorous, then you'll probably be keeping animals for food, as well as raising crops of some sort. If you are organic, you want to keep things organic, and then you really have to raise everything, whether it's the animals or vegetables and fruits. You need to raise all that yourself. So you have to figure out what it is that you eat, and so to figure out what you're going to need to have on your homestead. If you're going to raise animals, there's not all areas will allow you to keep animals. So you need to keep in mind these items to figure out your homestead situation. And then sometimes there are animals that serve no purpose. Speaking of animals that serve no real purpose other than company, and I've got one right here. Yeah, here's our cat, China. She's a Sphinx. No hair. She's an indoor cat. She's sitting here next to my desk where she keeps me company. Loves to be here while I'm working. Okay, China Chow. You can go back to what you do best. She's a sleeping champion. I think she needs to be in the Olympics. Okay, bye China. So, 2D, animals. Food, draft animals, critter control, security, or just for company. What is it you're thinking about when it comes to this area on a homestead? Even if you don't get the animals initially, it's really important to know what your long-term plans are. Now, maybe you won't get to jump right in and get a homestead that fulfills your near-term and long-term goals. You may have to get something that just fulfills the near-term and go from there. But you want to know, and some of these you can write down, short-term this, long-term that. So when we think about animals in the food category, obviously we can use them for their products, whether it's eggs, milk, or that's not really a byproduct. Their products are for their meat. Doesn't really matter. It still takes the same amount to grow them. And it should be noted that in our plastic-wrapped society today, that thinking about butchering your own animals may seem totally repugnant, repulsive, gross to you. But if you get on a homestead and you start dealing with all these other issues, you'll be able to handle it at some point, and you'll get over your aversion. My personal belief is that if you're going to eat meat, you should have the personal integrity to be willing to go out and raise it and slaughter it yourself. It's also the only way you're going to control what goes into that meat so that you know what you're eating. And step away from the plastic-wrapped carcass on the styrofoam tray you find at the supermarket. Now, we personally don't eat meat, but I have no problems with people that raise and butcher their own animals. That's fine. You're giving the animal a life, and in return, it's giving you food. As long as people are kind to their animals while their animals are alive. Next category is draft and transportation animals, and we really don't see much of this today. There's a couple of homesteaders on Doug and Stacy's homestead where he has a draft horse for plowing his field. And I think that stuff's great. It's marvelous. Although typically today with such small areas we're growing, it would be difficult for most of us to support the idea of having a draft animal for the very little uses we'd use it for. But if you want to have animals anyway, then why not? If you want to have a horse or an ox, I don't know, then, put it to use. Security and critter control. Sometimes the same thing. People have cats to keep down the mice. People have dogs. Dogs also keep down some of the unwanted critter elements, as well as providing security. I don't know that cats provide much security, frankly. Our cat tends to run and hide if someone comes to the door. Companionship animals. What is it that you... I don't know. What are your expectations? What are your needs in this area? I think if you had animals in the other categories, you may not need an extra animal for companionship, so to speak. And although I believe that being vegan is far better for our health and better spiritually, I do feel it may be more difficult to be self-sustaining without food animals, without animals that are producing food. Because of the cycles when you're growing vegetables, because there are times when things are lean or a crop is wiped out and people would rely on their animals. They might have to start butchering their animals. It seems to provide something to get you past those waves. We'll have to be very careful about storing enough types of foods. So in summary of this section, let's quickly go over that. Here's your homework. Food animals. What food animals would you consider? What would you really want to have on your property? What do you want to raise, grow? Security, critter control. What animals in this category? Draft, transportation animals. Any needs here? Okay, now we move on to 2E, work situation. Sorry about this, folks, but work permeates a lot of things. It's often one of the biggest limiter. I guess in the one way it can limit us, and in the other way it's what actually provides what allows us to be a homesteader. But so there's two sides to every story. Sorry, but work permeates many categories. But if you're going to have to change your situation regarding work, like if you have to change jobs, if you're going to have to revisit what you're doing for a living to earn money for a homestead, if you're going to have to revisit that, then it's good to think about your likes and dislikes. And, it's best if you can find something that you like and are good at, better than something you don't like and are good at, or don't like and are bad at. That'd really be tough. So if you have to make a change, then, be thinking about this. Well, what's the kind of work you desire? Is it solitary work? Is it manual work? Is it office work? Is it social work? And there's every gradation thereof. Of course, most of us would probably offer minimal work and maximum pay, but it usually doesn't work that way. So in summary, here's your homework on this is work. Well, at least one of you have to consider changing your work. And if so, start making a list of what kind of areas or how you might be able to earn a living. And I wouldn't count on kind of pie in the sky things, you're going to make your money off of YouTube until you've actually done it, because you find that some people, you're never going to be able to get there. And if you jump into it and are relying on that and it doesn't transpire, then you lose your homestead, and it's just not a good thing. So got to be realistic. 2F, school. Do you have children that are in school? Or will you have children that will be going through school? Well, what kind of schooling are you looking for those children? Is it, do you want to do homeschooling? Are you looking to have them in the normal schools of the county, or a church school, or, what's the private school? What are your considerations on this? How that can factor heavily into your homestead decision. And the other thing on this and any of the other topics is, what is your level of conviction about how you feel about it? I know those who would not even think of doing anything but homeschool their kids. And you see others that wouldn't think of anything but going to a private school with their children. So it's like you can have a real wide range here and everything in between. So understand your level of conviction on these things, because, sometimes there's trade-offs. We might trade off something there, but if we have a super strong conviction, then there's just no trading off. We're going to have to put that high on our list. Hey, we get down to one of my favorite topics. 2G, organization and cleanliness. This is a two-edged sword. It really is. Organization is one of your, I gotta say, like, your best gifts. It's a wonderful trait in some ways, if not carried too far. Same way with cleanliness. Now, Mrs. RH and I tend to fall in the category of being very organized, and we like things very clean and very well kept. And going too far in that direction, it can take too much time for too little results. Well, going on the other side of the scale, we know people that they're very sloppy and unorganized, and well, then that slows them down too. So I think there's really a happy medium in there. I'm kind of hoping we're kind of at least on the borders of the happy medium, that we're not too far afield. But we get back to this topic. It's about, what is your nature? And this is something you need to understand, because it does affect the choices. For example, in a house, we like things very organized and very clean and tidy. So I knew in getting into a house, we both knew in getting in a house that we were going to have to fix that up till we were comfortable with it, which means having everything taken care of. We didn't move into this house. Well, I think actually we're still working on the kitchen at the time and this office. Then we moved in downstairs into the bedroom. But basically, all the major work on the place was done. We moved in. We wanted everything done. We're like that. That's our nature. You can fight your nature, but it can make things more difficult. You got to realize that that's probably where you're going to fall back into. You got to realize and take that into account. Doesn't mean you let your nature dictate everything, but you need to understand that as what your proclivity is. So we spent 3.5 years living in our trailer, preparing the house before we moved into it, because once we move into something, we don't want to have to be remodeling it while we're living in it, because it's going to create all kinds of mess and construction debris and all that. So we want to get a place finished before we move into it. Others might have moved in the first few weeks. So you need to understand what your proclivity in this is. Doesn't matter what we do. It's like, what does it work for you? What works for you? So your questions are organization and cleanliness. Where do you lie on that spectrum between, clean freak, organizational freak, and, or to the other side, and for both of you, how's that going to work out? Yeah, and sometimes there's particular elements that we can be bothered by on the positive side or the negative side. And how will they impact your decision? So now we move in to item 3. Income situation. This is kind of the how situation. This is a pivotal issue for most or many homesteaders. Oh, we've got RH in stereo here, don't we? I'll have to put an end to that. Your income situation is one of the pivotal factors, of course, in deciding your homestead. What you want is to be able to get into a homestead and have it to be sustainable. You want to get into it and continue forward and be able to, go forward with everything. It's very expensive, not only to get the homestead, but maintain the homestead and set it up the way you need it. It costs quite a bit. What you don't want is to be able to get into a homestead and then have to lose it later on because, you don't have the funds, the money to keep it up. Some people get the idea that they're just going to jump off and, live on their own, and it's just very unrealistic many times. So you got to use care about that. So here we need to assess your situation. What's your situation, your income situation, your economic situation? What do you have in terms of savings, equity, stocks, etc.? Can you afford to buy a place that's ready-made? You're going to have to look for a fixer. You're going to look for land and then build it up. So these are very important questions. It should be realized that when it comes to money in the bank, I'd rather have property than money in the bank. We've had economic collapses before with the banks, and they did bailouts. The government bailed them out. But it appears that when this happens the next time, and it wasn't by accident, when it happens the next time, it'll probably be what's termed a bail-in situation. You may want to look that up. That happened in Greece and some other areas. And now when the banks fail, rather than the government bailing them out, the idea is they just take the funds from the people that had money in the bank to bail the bank out. So you could lose a substantial portion of what's in there. Just something to keep in mind. I'm not against banks, just realize that it could vaporize. It should also be remembered, you can't eat dollar bills. Well, you can't eat them. They just really don't taste very good or provide much nutrition. Be sure they're organic dollar bills, and be careful about that. So in this situation, we want to think about what do you have on hand when it comes to income and when it comes to savings and such. What do you have on hand? How far would these monies go in entering a homestead situation? Next, B in this item is retirement income, annuities, other regular income. Do you have some regular income that you're not having to work for day to day that's coming in regularly? That's marvelous. If you do, man. So the question's here, do you have any non-work income? Or is there any non-work income on the horizon? I mean, some people are ready to retire and they can actually get a retirement income. So, think about that. Know what's available there. Think about your 401ks as well. We actually, speaking of retirement, we actually used a large portion of that to buy this place. But so be it. Like I said, the banks could collapse and we didn't want to be trapped by that. C in this, 3C, paid work, business. Now this is where most of us fall into. We need to work while we're on a homestead. This work can take many different forms. Many homesteaders are leaning towards either already doing it or leaning towards getting themselves in a situation where they can work from their home, like working over the internet. Many people that do office type working can work from anywhere. If you're doing web design, if you're helping people with their internet sites, or many other things, different types of consulting. I do work relative to intellectual property, and I'm able to do it right from here. I can work from anywhere. Yeah, being able to work from home is a real blessing, and I'm real thankful that I am able to do that. I can shift my work schedule around such that I'm able to do my work, like for example in the wintertime it's cold in the morning, so I'll do my work on the computer when it's cold. When it warms up in the middle of the day, I'll go out and try to do some things outside, and then in the evening I'll come back in and do some work. Summertime it can be the other way around, but and if I need to go run errands, I'm pretty much free. I just have to put enough time in on my work to earn enough money. So that's an ideal situation. I'm really thankful to we're really thankful to the Lord for that, and to my employer. Do you still need a paycheck like the majority of folks? Can you presently work your job from a remote situation? Can your existing job and career be leveraged towards that end? Or do you have to make a job change? Do you have a budding business venture that could earn you enough money to be able to use that as your income on the homestead? Now that gets all the way down through the paid work and business. Now there's many things I won't have run across. I'd love to hear in the comments what items about our nature that should show up on this list. I'd like to embellish this list. And speaking of the list, it's up in the description section. The list is up in the description section. So you can go up there and get this list. And it's your homework. So go through this, figure these things out. We'll be going in the next episode, we'll be going and talking about physical health and personality and skill inventory. And then talking about the current real estate market for where you're at or planning. And then homestead strategy. And we'll get that in the next episode. So please comment. We'd like to hear your comments, where you're at, what you're thinking about, what other areas do you believe are important. I would love to hear that and help others. It's important to have enough motivation and to make the right decisions. So any comments you can have that will help others with that, we'd really appreciate it. And, speaking of which, we'd appreciate it if you give us a thumbs up if you like the material. And you could use that thumb to press on the subscribe button there. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Hasta la Proyecto.